Okay, I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Picture it. The year is 1964.
Right.
The Beatles have just exploded onto the American scene, the Ed Sullivan Show. The
Right.
Cold War is, well, it's chilly enough to freeze your breath.
Definitely.
We're obsessed as a culture with the external world, with going to the moon, the whole space race, with physics, with rock and roll. Everything is pointed outward.
But in a quiet, probably smoke-filled living room in Elmira, New York, a woman named Jane Roberts is doing the exact opposite.
Exactly. She isn't looking out, she's looking in.
And she is finding something that, I mean, arguably makes the moon landing look like a quick trip to the corner store.
That is a perfect way to put it. Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we are not analyzing a tech IPO. We're not breaking down the latest geopolitical shuffle.
No, not at all.
We are opening a file that challenges, and I mean it really challenges, the fundamental physics of your own body, of reality itself. We were looking at session 101 of the early sessions, book 3 of the Seth Material.
It's a really fascinating document, and just to ground everyone, to give you the context, the date of record here is October 28, 1964.
1964.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. There is no New Age movement yet. There's no manifesting trend on TikTok. This is raw, completely uncharted territory.
It's the source code.
It really is. You have Jane Roberts sitting there, entering a trance state, and speaking for an entity who calls himself Seth, all while her husband, Robert Butts, who Seth calls Joseph, is just furiously scribbling everything down in shorthand.
An amazing process.
Yeah.
And before we float off into the ether, we do have some important housekeeping.
Right.
This podcast, this deep dive, will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We also owe a massive, massive debt of gratitude to the New Awareness Network for publishing this material and, for keeping these incredible archives alive.
Absolutely. They've done a huge service. And maybe just a quick reminder on our role here. We are explorers. We're here to unpack the text.
That's it.
We aren't priests. We are certainly not gurus, and we are not here to tell you what to believe. We're just here to look at what's in the file, analyze the arguments that Seth makes, and, well, to stress test them against our own understanding of reality.
Objectively. But yeah, with a healthy dose of what if. Because I have to tell you, the hook for this particular session caught me immediately, right away.
Oh, me too.
Seth basically asks us to reconsider the entire architecture of the afterlife. It's not pearly gates or nothingness. He talks about why ghosts might actually be stuck in a cramped tunnel. And this is the part that genuinely made me put my coffee down. He talks about how your atoms, the actual physical stuff you are made of, have their own consciousness, their own memory.
It's the physics of ghosts, essentially. But it's not a spooky ghost story. It's more like it's a mechanic's manual for the soul.
A mechanic's manual. I love that.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this. Seth starts this session by referencing a very specific event that was happening in Jane and Rob's life at the time.
Right.
They call it the case of the landlord's father.
Yeah, and this is what makes it so interesting. He always grounds the big metaphysical concepts in a real-world situation.
Right. It's not just abstract.
Exactly. So apparently there had been some form of communication from their landlord's deceased father. He was appearing or speaking through his wife, who Seth says was acting as a sort of relay station.
Relay station. I love that terminology. It sounds so mechanical, like a radio tower. It just strips all the spooky woo-woo stuff right out of it.
And that's often how Seth describes mediumship. It's not magic, it's a form of mechanics, energy transfer. But the interesting part is that Seth immediately validates it. He doesn't dismiss it. He says, yes, this is a valid communication.
Okay.
It's not a hallucination, it's not just grief. But then he explains where this father is. And this is the first big concept. He says he is on a midplane of existence.
A midplane. Okay.
Right.
So not the final destination, but more like a stopover. A cosmic O'Hare airport.
Let's hope it's a little better than O'Hare, maybe with fewer delays.
One can hope.
But yes, think of it exactly like that. It's a waiting room. Or maybe a better analogy is a decompression chamber.
Decompression. I like that. Like a diver who's been deep underwater and has to come up slowly to acclimate.
That's precisely the feeling. And Seth defines it very specifically. He says, personalities in such transition are thereby allowed to acclimate themselves in a period of neutrality and relative passivity.
Neutrality and passivity. See, that's what's so interesting, because usually we hear about the afterlife in these very dramatic terms. It's an explosion of joy. You see all your relatives, or it's judgment, or fire and brimstone.
Right. Very active states.
But neutrality sounds quiet. It sounds calm.
And there is a deeply functional reason for that quiet. It's not just a vacation. It's not just a rest stop. Think about your life right now. Think about just your day-to-day.
Okay.
You've got 50 tabs open in your brain at any given moment. You're worrying about the rent. You're thinking about what to make for dinner. You're replaying a stupid argument from 3 years ago, all while you're driving a car. Your self is fragmented. It's scattered.
I feel personally attacked. I am currently thinking about at least 3 of those things right now.
We all are. That's just the nature of physical survival. We have to be. We are spread thin across time and space. Now, just imagine if you died in that state.
Chaos.
Total chaos. If you crossed over while your consciousness was that scattered, you wouldn't be able to function in a higher dimensional reality. You'd just be a mess. You'd be psychic static.
So the midplane is where you go to close all the tabs.
Precisely. That is the perfect analogy for it. Seth says the goal is to let various portions of the whole self once more collect together. You need that period of neutrality to pull all of your pieces, all those scattered bits of attention, back into a cohesive whole before you can move on.
It's a reintegration phase.
It's a complete reintegration.
It makes so much more sense than the idea of judgment. It's not about being good or bad. It's about logistics. You have to pack your psychological bags before you can get on the plane to the next destination.
It's all about energy dynamics. It's not morality, it's physics. And Seth mentions this process happens within what he calls the spacious present.
The spacious present.
Yeah.
That's a recurring concept in his material, and I've always struggled with that term. It sounds like a big empty room.
It does sound a bit abstract, but think of it this way. Our concept of time is like a tightrope, a thin line we walk on with the past behind us and the future in front. We're always rushing.
Right.
The spacious present is the idea that time isn't a line you walk on. It's a vast pool you can swim in. So in the midplane, you aren't fighting the clock. There is no clock. You have the space within time to collect yourself without pressure.
So there's no deadline for getting your act together.
Exactly. You take as much time as you need, but, and this is where it gets really active, it's not a static state. You don't just sit in this waiting room forever, reading old magazines from 1982.
Right. He mentioned something about an acceleration, doesn't he? Like a launch sequence.
Yes. This is the next stage. He says that once the self collects together, once you've closed all the tabs and your consciousness is whole again, a mental acceleration begins. He specifically calls it an electromagnetic sequence.
See, that's what I mean about the physics language he uses. Electromagnetic sequence. Doesn't sound spiritual. It sounds like an engine starting up in a sci-fi movie.
That is exactly what it is. It's a propulsion system for the soul. Seth says this interaction of the now whole self creates its own impetus, a powerful push that launches the personality into the next field of actuality.
So, death isn't a dead end. It's not even a full stop. It's a dynamic process. You pause, you collect, the engine revs up, and then boom, you project forward into the next reality.
It's almost like a slingshot maneuver in space.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, you pull back into this point of neutrality to generate the tension, to gather the potential energy, and then you release.
And it has nothing to do with earning your wings or being judged by a higher power. It's just the mechanics of consciousness.
It's the natural next step in the flow of energy.
Okay, so the pilot, the you, the core personality, is ejected.
Yeah.
You're safely in the midplane, putting yourself back together. But we have to talk about the plane you left behind.
The body.
The body. Because usually we think of the body as just a shell, an empty vessel. I leave the car, and the car is just a hunk of metal. But Seth says it's way, way more complicated than that.
He does. He anticipates the logical next question. If the spirit is gone, why is the body still here? Why doesn't it just, poof, vanish?
Right.
He says, and I'm quoting here, when the personality withdraws itself from the physical image in a sort of slow motion of actual simultaneous happenings, this is what occurs.
Slow motion of actual simultaneous happenings. That is a mouthful. But let's break down this concept of the after image, because this is where things get really strange.
This is where it goes from spiritual philosophy to something that feels like quantum biology. Seth explains that the physical image doesn't vanish immediately because the materials it's made of, the atoms, the molecules, the organs, they have their own consciousness.
This is the part where I had to pause the recording I was listening to and just stare at the wall for a solid minute. The atoms in my hand have consciousness.
According to Seth, yes. It's a concept that philosophers call panpsychism. The idea that mind or consciousness is a fundamental feature of the universe, not just something that magically pops up in complex brains.
So it's not just me who's conscious. My liver is conscious in its own way.
In its own way, yes. and your skin cells and the carbon atoms that make up those cells. Seth says this consciousness of organs, atoms, and molecules is left undiminished.
Okay, let's use a corporate analogy here because that's the only way my brain can process this.
Go for it.
When I die, the CEO of the company, that's me, my ego, my main self, I leave the building. I've resigned.
Right. The boss has walked out.
But the employees, my liver cells, the carbon atoms in my hand, the bacteria in my gut, they don't just quit instantly. They keep showing up for work the next day.
That is a brilliant way to put it. The boss has abdicated, which is the word Seth uses, but the staff still has a little residual vitality left. They remember the routine. They remember the structure.
The atoms remember being a hand.
They remember their job. They have a localized intelligence. But, and this is key, Seth notes that without the organizing intelligence of the inner self, the CEO, the atoms don't have enough consciousness to hold form or organization to any degree for very long.
They need management. Without a manager, everyone just starts doing their own thing, and eventually the whole company falls apart.
Exactly. And without management, the supply chain breaks down. Seth makes a great point about this. He mentions that while you're alive, the inner self allows for openings for new material to enter. That's you eating, breathing, that's cellular repair.
The delivery trucks bringing supplies to the factory.
Precisely. When the self leaves, those doors close, the repair shop is shuttered, no new deliveries are coming in.
So the employees are still there, milling about, but no new shipments of parts are arriving, and nobody is telling them what to build. So eventually the factory just falls apart. That's decay.
That's decay, but, and this is a huge but, there is another factor keeping the factory standing, at least for a while. It's not just the confused employees.
It's the neighbors.
It's the neighbors. It's the observer effect.
This is wild.
Seth explicitly states the image is also maintained partially by those who view it.
So let me get this straight. If I go to a funeral and I look at the body in the casket, I am actively, telepathically helping to keep that body solid.
You are contributing to the energy field that maintains its form, yes. Your expectation that the body is there, that it looks a certain way, acts as a sort of psychic glue. We are collectively reinforcing the physical reality of the deceased because we expect it to exist.
That sounds suspiciously like quantum mechanics, the double-slit experiment. The idea that the act of observation fundamentally changes the reality being observed.
It is very, very similar. And remember, he's saying this in 1964. The popular understanding of quantum mechanics was nowhere near where it is today. He's suggesting that matter itself is a collaborative effort.
Consensus.
A consensus reality. The atoms are doing their part, holding on to their old jobs out of habit, and the observers, the living, are doing their part, projecting the idea of the body into physical space.
Wow, it makes the physical world feel so much more fluid, malleable, like it's not as solid and dependable as we think it is. It's being held together by habit and expectation.
That is a recurring theme, maybe the core theme in the Seth Material. Matter is just energy held in a specific pattern by consciousness.
Yeah.
If you remove the primary consciousness and you remove the observing consciousnesses, the pattern eventually dissolves.
Okay, so we've got the person who died. They're in the midplane. They're closing their browser tabs, getting ready to launch into the next phase. The body is left behind, being temporarily maintained by the confused atoms and the grieving relatives. But what about the people who don't launch? What about the ones who stick around? We have to talk about ghosts.
We do, and Seth gives a very compassionate but also very technical explanation for hauntings. He doesn't frame it as something evil or scary. He talks about personality retention.
Personality retention. Sounds like water retention.
Yeah.
Like something is stuck where it shouldn't be.
In a way, that's a good analogy. Even after the main personality leaves, there is a retention of what Seth calls physical reference points.
Meaning?
Basically, the spirit is just used to the physical world. It's known for decades. So it has a powerful mental and emotional attraction to the house it lived in, the favorite armchair, the spouse, the children.
So it's nostalgia. It's just hanging around because it's familiar.
It's a magnetic nostalgia. Seth says this retention projects back into the physical field, but here's the tragic part of it, or the chilling part, depending on how you look at it.
Oh.
The living play a huge role in keeping them stuck.
Oh, this is the part that made me feel so guilty about every time I've been sad about someone dying.
Well, it's the emotional need, as Seth puts it. When the living are grieving intensely, when they are desperately calling out for the deceased, that raw emotion acts like a form of gravity.
Like a tractor beam.
A tractor beam is a perfect way to put it. Seth says it adds to the pull. binding portions of the personality to the physical field.
So our grief is literally holding them back. We are anchors. We think we're honoring them, but we're actually chaining them to a reality they need to leave.
And from their perspective, it causes bewilderment and disorientation. Imagine you're trying to leave a party. You're walking towards the door, ready to go home, but your friends keep grabbing your arm, pulling you back to the dance floor, saying, "One more song. Don't go."
You'd be so disoriented and frustrated.
Exactly. You're trying to get to that midplane to collect yourself, but you keep getting yanked back by these intense emotional cords from the people you loved and left behind. It creates a powerful resistance in their transformation.
That's heavy. It really changes how you view the grieving process. It's almost like, for their sake, the healthiest thing you can do is let go, is to genuinely say, it's okay, you can go, we'll be all right.
That is the profound implication here. You have to let them graduate. Because if you don't, you are unintentionally keeping them in a state of confusion, trapped between worlds.
But Seth does say they can come back to visit later, right?
Yeah.
Once they've graduated, so to speak, once they're stable and integrated on the other side.
Yes, absolutely. He makes that very clear. He says later, when entrance into a higher dimension is achieved, the personality can communicate without that disorientation. They're strong enough, cohesive enough to handle it then.
Okay.
But, and here's the big twist, they might not want to.
Why not?
Because of the cramped tunnel.
Yes. This analogy.
This is the analogy that really stuck with me from this session. Seth says that for a higher dimensional personality to come back to our physical reality, the experience could be likened to going down into a small, cramped tunnel.
That is such a complete perspective flip.
Mm-hmm.
Usually we think of the afterlife as this ghostly, misty, barely there, faded place.
Mm.
And we think we are the solid, real, important ones here in the physical world.
Right. We think they are the ones fading away. But Seth is saying, no, you've got it completely backward. We are the ones living in the crawl space. We are the ones in the narrow, restricted dimension.
And for them, their new reality is, what do you say, so much more vivid and so much fuller proportioned.
Exactly. So coming back to talk to us is like a fully grown adult trying to squeeze back into their toddler clothes.
Or, like you said, squeezing into a ventilation duct.
It's claustrophobic, it's limiting. They have to literally shut off huge parts of their expanded perception just to fit into our narrow 3D world. Imagine you are standing in a beautiful, infinite, sunlit meadow, and to talk to your friend, you have to crawl into a dark, muddy sewer pipe.
You might do it because you love them, but you are not going to want to stay there for very long.
Not for a second longer than you have to.
It really makes you wonder about the nature of our reality. Are we? Are we the flatland of the universe?
Oh, speaking of flatland, that is a perfect segue, because Seth actually brings up that exact concept. And there's this really funny, very human little moment in the session notes regarding Jane Roberts and her reading habits.
Yes. I loved this part. It felt so real. Seth mentions that Ruburt, that's his name for Jane, is to be congratulated.
Why?
Because she's finally started reading physics books.
Just to keep up with him? That's hilarious.
Exactly. Jane was apparently realizing that this entity she was channeling knew way more about theoretical physics than she did, and she was scrambling to catch up. She was reading these books and being completely astounded that Seth had already explained these complex concepts to her months or even years ago.
And that's a great detail, because it pushes back against the skeptic's easy explanation that she was just making it all up from her subconscious. If she's surprising herself with the physics and she's scrambling to learn the terminology to match what she's already saying in a trance state, well, that's interesting data.
It really is.
Yeah.
And one of the things she had apparently just read about was that classic thought experiment, the idea of imaginary two-dimensional people living on a flat sheet of paper.
Right, the Flatlanders.
Yeah, if you are a 2D stick figure, you have length and width. You can move left, right, forward, and back. But if a 3D sphere passes through your 2D world...
You don't see a sphere. You can't. You don't have the perception for up or down. You just see a tiny dot that appears out of nowhere.
Which then grows into a larger circle and then shrinks back to a dot and then vanishes. It would look like magic.
Pure magic. You could never comprehend the three-dimensional object that caused it. And Seth uses that exact analogy to explain our relationship to what he calls the fifth dimension. He says, we are enclosed in a system that limits our perception. In this analogy, we are the 2D people.
We're the Flatlanders. And so things like birth and death, which seem like a beginning and an end to us,
are just the sphere passing through our plane of existence. We see the circle appear, grow, and shrink. but we don't see the full sphere that exists before, during, and after its intersection with our world.
So, okay, let's talk about this fifth dimension. I know Seth has mentioned it before in previous sessions, but he goes into some more detail here. What does a fifth-dimensional universe even look like?
Well, first off, you have to throw out your ruler. You have to throw out every measuring tape you own. Seth says, width, height, length have no meaning in dimensions that do not have existence in space as you know it.
No height, no width, no depth.
Yeah.
That just breaks my brain a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you have existence without those things?
It's supposed to break your brain. He's trying to describe a fundamentally non-physical reality using our limited physical language. He says that in this dimension there are no constants.
No constants. What does that mean?
In our world, things are reliable. Gravity is a constant. The speed of light is a constant. A chair, for the most part, stays a chair from one moment to the next.
Right. It's predictable.
But in the fifth dimension, Seth says, camouflages are adopted to fit numberless other dimensions as the structure itself continually changes.
So it's a shape-shifting reality.
It's a completely responsive reality. It changes based on the mental and emotional vitality of the inhabitants. It's a place where thoughts, emotions, and intentions instantly become the landscape. There's no time lag.
That sounds like a lucid dream, but
Yeah.
real and permanent.
It's very similar mechanics, but the key physics point Seth makes here is about how these different dimensions interact, or rather how they don't interact. He talks about the pass-through effect.
The pass-through effect.
Right. He says, I have told you many times that planes or fields move through each other often and do not collide.
Like radio waves.
Exactly like radio waves. That's the perfect modern analogy. Right now, in the room you are sitting in, there are dozens, maybe hundreds of different signals. There's Wi-Fi, there are FM and AM radio broadcasts, there are cellular data streams, maybe police scanner frequencies, TV signals, all occupying the very same space.
And they don't crash into each other. And they don't crash into me.
Because they are all on different frequencies, their reference points, as Seth would say, are different. Seth is saying that dimensions work the exact same way. The fifth dimension is right here, right now, moving through us. There could be an entire bustling civilization walking through your living room as we speak.
Okay, that is both comforting and absolutely terrifying at the same time.
It is, but because you don't have the receiver for that frequency, because your consciousness isn't tuned to that station, to you, the room is empty.
Wow.
And Seth even mentions that there are some dimensions that are so alien we can never understand them. He says there are systems based on emotional equations that can never be solved from your system.
Emotional equations. I love that phrase. It implies that in some universes, an emotion like love or rage is as hard and measurable and mathematical as a rock is in ours.
And that our emotional explosions here, our moments of intense joy or anger, might actually appear as physical mass in those other systems.
Whoa! So, my bad mood could literally be a boulder in another dimension?
According to Seth, energy is never lost. It just translates, it changes form. And speaking of energy translation, we should probably talk about what this whole process does to Jane herself.
Yeah, let's ground this back in that room in Elmira with Jane and Rob. Because at the end of the session, Seth talks about why Jane gets so tired sometimes. And it's not just from talking for an hour straight.
No, it's the cost of doing business across dimensions. Seth explains that during a session, there is a constant translation of energy from one dimension plane to another. Jane has to fundamentally change her own reference points to let this information through.
So it's not like she's just an actor reading a script. It's a deep physiological and psychological shifting of gears.
A profound one. And Seth also mentions her resistances. He says Jane naturally and thankfully sets up automatic resistances to block out other influences while she's in that open state.
Like a psychic firewall.
Exactly like a firewall. When you open yourself up to channel, you become incredibly vulnerable. You're opening a door. So her subconscious, her higher self, puts up a firewall to keep out spiritual spam or static or worse.
But maintaining that firewall while simultaneously letting Seth's very specific frequency through must take a huge amount of energy.
A tremendous amount. And that's why she's exhausted after some sessions and weirdly exuberant after others. It depends on the energy dynamics of that particular session.
It really highlights that this isn't just a mental exercise for her. It has real physical symptoms. And actually, that leads us perfectly to the notes at the very, very end of the file.
The psychological time notebook.
Yes, these are Jane's personal notes from the days surrounding this exact session,
Okay.
specifically October 29th through the 31st, Halloween. And honestly, this stuff sounds like a bad acid trip or a good one, I guess, depending on your perspective.
It's extremely sensory. This isn't just her hearing voices. She describes these profound distortions of her own body image, her physical self.
Right, she talks about her foot feeling airborne, like it was just going to float away.
Yeah, she writes, "My left foot first began to feel airborne, ready to disappear." She said she actually had to wiggle her toes just to reassure herself that the foot was still physically there.
And then the chest cavity thing.
Slight but definite feeling of cavity where chest is. She feels hollowed out, like there's an empty space inside her.
And the weirdest one for me, the one that really stuck with me, was the rope of flesh.
Oh, yes. That's a strange one. She's lying in bed, her feet are about 6 inches apart, but she feels a bridge or rope of flesh connecting them, a definite pull between them.
What is going on there? Is that just a simple hallucination? Is she just overtired?
Well, in the context of the Seth material, what's happening is that Jane is experiencing the elasticity of matter that Seth is always talking about. She's entering that state he calls psychological time, where the rigid, fixed rules of the physical body start to soften and become more fluid.
So she's literally feeling the energetic connections that are usually invisible to our five senses.
That's the idea. We think our bodies are these separate, distinct objects with hard boundaries, but at an atomic or energy level, the boundaries are much, much blurrier. She is feeling that blur. She's feeling the energetic rope that connects the parts of her own whole.
It's like she's getting a sneak preview of that fifth dimension, where form isn't fixed and rigid.
And then she also hears voices. There's a very specific one she notes down. A middle-aged man's voice saying, very clearly, "You're my oldest daughter. I have great faith in you."
Which is so incredibly specific. It's not just a random whisper. It makes you wonder, is she tuning into someone else's conversation from across town? Or a past life memory?
Or just the general chatter of the midplane. If all these dimensions are like radio waves passing through us, maybe she just accidentally tuned her dial to a random frequency for a second and overheard something?
It really grounds the whole session, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just high-minded philosophy about atoms and planes and dimensions. It's a woman lying in bed in 1964 feeling like her feet are melting together. It's visceral. It's human.
That is what makes the Seth material so powerful and so enduring. It marries the highest concept physics with the messy, confusing, sometimes scary human experience of it. It says, yes, the universe is infinitely more complex and magical than you think, and yes, you are going to feel it in your bones.
So let's just zoom out for a second. We've covered a massive amount of ground today. I mean, we started with the landlord's father waiting in the cosmic lounge.
The midplane, the great place of integration.
And we moved to the atoms that keep working after the boss quits. The factory of the body that keeps running on momentum and habit.
And the role that we, the living, play in keeping that factory standing with our own expectations.
We talked about the cramped tunnel, that completely mind-bending idea that coming back to Earth is a limitation for a spirit, not a liberation. And then finally, the shape-shifting reality of the fifth dimension that is apparently passing right through us as we speak.
It's a lot to take in. It really is. But the core message, I think, seems to be that death is not an ending. It's not even a failure of the body. It's a transition. It's a shifting of gears. And it's a process that is deeply, profoundly connected to how we think and feel right here, right now.
And that we, the living, have a kind of responsibility in that process. Our grief, our expectations, our love, they all matter. They have a real physical or maybe metaphysical effect. They shape the reality for those who have crossed over.
Absolutely. We are powerful creators, as Seth always says, whether we realize it or not.
Now, if you are listening to this and your brain is buzzing, that is a good thing. That's the goal. But please, don't stop here. We've really only scratched the surface of Session 101.
Oh, for sure. There's so much more in the full text, the nuances of how Seth speaks, the back and forth interaction with Rob, the specific exercises Seth sometimes gives. You really have to read it for yourself.
So here is your mission, should you choose to accept it. Go deeper than this conversation. Go and study the Seth Material books for yourself. You can find them, and just a treasure trove of other resources at the New Awareness Network website. Go to sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
Seriously, go check it out. It's a rabbit hole that is well worth falling down.
And before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought, just a little something to keep you up tonight.
Uh-oh. Let's hear it.
We talked about the after image. We talked about how the body, and by extension, the entire physical world, is maintained partly because we expect it to be there. We're all telepathically holding it together in a consensus.
Right. It's a collective agreement.
So, I want you to look around the room you are in right now. Look at the walls, the chair you're sitting on, the phone or the device in your hand. How much of that is real, and how much of it is only solid because you haven't given it permission to disappear yet?
That is a dangerous and wonderful question.
Just don't blink too hard. You might miss the walls dissolving.
Stop it. You're going to give me nightmares.
Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you in the next dimension.
Or at least in the next deep dive.
Take care, everybody.